Hello, my beautiful sisters, and welcome back to a brand new season of the Woman of Faith podcast. I am your host, Nancy Ruffin, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to be back with you. I took a longer hiatus from last season that I had wanted to, but it was very much needed. And as a professional life coach and leadership coach, one of the things that I stress with my clients and with the women that I work with is that when we have so many responsibilities and when there are different things competing for our attention, it is so important for us to honor ourselves, honor our bodies, and really pause when our bodies are telling us to rest. And so even though the break was a little longer than normal, it was something that I needed to do. But nevertheless, I am back with a new season that I'm really excited about. If this is your very first time tuning in, welcome. I'm excited to have you here. If you haven't checked out all of our old episodes, I encourage you go back, check them out. Once you do that, go back to my other podcast that I had before this one, the Empowerment Hour, and check out those episodes. There's so much content that is really designed to give you hope, filled with inspiration, giving you practical tips that you can apply to your everyday life, to help you kind of journey through this thing called life. If this is, if you're returning and if you have been a supporter of mine, for a while, then welcome back. As you have already learn to expect from me. I'm going to keep it real, right? You're not going to get any fluff here. We're going to talk about life. I'm going to tell it how it is. And I'm also going to have guests that come in and share, their own stories and their own journeys. Because one of the things that I wholeheartedly believe, especially as someone who's a storyteller, especially as someone who uses my words and my voice, um, there's always something that we can learn from someone else's story. And so many times when we're going through our own challenges or when we find ourselves in our own storms, it's really easy for us to believe that we're in it alone, that we're the only ones that have ever gone through it. And so for me, I encourage the sharing because what it does is that it shows other women, it shows other people that they're not alone. And then it gives them the courage, one, to share their story, but it also gives them hope. Hope that if you and I got through whatever it was that we got through, then they can also get through their own season. Um, and so, like I said, if you've been with me for past seasons, then you already know that this is a place where we have real conversations that are rooted in God's word, right? Because we always got to take it back to God. My faith is not just a part of who I am, it's my entire being. Like everything I do is rooted in God. And whether that's this podcast, whether it's the work that I do with my coaching clients, whether it's my work at the hospital, the way that I raise my children, like God is at the center of it. And so I always want to encourage you and anyone who is listening that as you navigate this thing called life, the only way you're going to make it through is if you keep God at the center of it. That He has already written our stories, He already knows the ending. And so we need Him to guide us, to help us, to lead us. And so as you start your day, whenever it is that you're listening to this podcast, give your day to God and ask Him to give you the strength you might need for the day, to give you the patience that you might need for the day, and to just really guide your mind, your thoughts, your actions, the interactions that you have with others, because all of it matters. All of it matters to God. And yeah, and so just want to kind of put that out there. this season I'm really excited for. Some of the things that you can expect, of course, are more interviews. I don't think I did that many interviews in our last season, but this season I have been very intentional about inviting other guests, other women to come on here and really share their stories. So you can expect powerful conversations about faith, about leadership, about personal growth, all of the things that I'm known for, right? We're going to talk about the challenges that we face, the victories that we celebrate, right? The journey, because I know that a lot of times we're so focused on the outcome that we miss the journey. But the lessons, right, are really in the journey. It's about who you are becoming in that process to getting to wherever it is you ultimately want to get. And also, just in the midst of all of that, remembering how God shows up in all of it. And so, my prayer is that each week you leave encouraged, strengthened, and reminded that you were created for more. So, this week's topic, I thought about what I wanted to talk about, and honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to kick this new season off talking about. And then one day, one Sunday after church, my husband and I, ended up going like on a walk in our neighborhood. And we were talking about the podcast. And he was like, "Oh, well, what are you going to talk about, for the season?" And it was as I was preparing to actually record this episode. And I was like, you know what? I really don't know. I'm not really sure. I think I'm just going to sit and just press record and see what the Holy Spirit, right, prompts me to talk about. I said, unless you have like a recommendation, do you have any ideas? And he did. And he was like, maybe you can talk about what the summer was like for you, maybe the lessons that you learned during the summer. And then like, he just started talking. And as he was talking, the Holy Spirit started to talk to me. And I started to think about not just summer, but how we are transitioning from one season to the next, right? We're already in September. For most of us, the kids have already started school, and we're really entering this season of transition where we're kind of leaving the summer behind and preparing for the fall. And so I was like, okay, maybe we can talk about what it means, and how we can step into and embrace our seasons of transition. And so, lo and behold, that is this week's topic. So, this week, as we kick off the new season, I wanted to talk about our seasons of transition. It's what we're all experiencing right now. And it's such a great metaphor for life, right? Because life is a series of transitions. Sometimes we have warm, vibrant, exciting seasons like the summer. And then other times we may have cold, frigid seasons, like winter, seasons that keep us isolated, that keep us to ourselves, or maybe we find ourselves like now as we enter the fall in a season of shedding, of letting go, and then trying to make space for whatever it is that God is trying to do in our lives. But before we get there, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about my summer, give you an opportunity to kind of reflect also on your summer. What were I guess, the greatest takeaways for you? What were the lessons you learned? And maybe you haven't stopped to think about it, right? Because we are constantly on go mode. Um, and we never gift ourselves the opportunity to just sit, to be in silence, to reflect, to think about our day, our week, our month, and acknowledge the many ways that God has showed up for us and has delivered us from, a hard week. And, so for me, as I think about the summer, it really was a good mix of work, rest, and fun. During the summer, I really limit how much I work because, as you know, I work a regular full-time job. I work in healthcare. I'm in a hospital where I lead, several teams. And so my job is pretty demanding. And then I also have my consulting agency where I work with clients. I'm a coach, I'm a life coach, I'm a leadership coach. And then, of course, I also get hired out to speak at speaking events. But when the summer comes, I'm very intentional about limiting the work that I do. And so a lot of times I'm only focused on my regular 9 to 5 and I limit the coaching because I need to have time for myself and I need to have time for my family. Um, so that was pretty much what I did. I spent a lot of time with the family. We did a lot of pool days. We took a trip to Mexico, which was so much fun. It was a large group of us, and if you've been following me on social for a while, you know that I have a really close relationship with my family, whether it's my sister, my titi Millie, friends. Like I have a really great community of people that I do life with. And so we planned this trip to Mexico. It was a family trip. So it was my family, my sister's family, Titi Millie and her husband, my parents, and then it was our friends and their family. So altogether, there was about 60 of us in our group. On the flight going to Mexico, probably half of that flight was us. And we got there and it was so much fun. What really made it great is that there were so many kids. So like the children had their own little core group, their own little community. They did things together, which really gave the parents an opportunity to enjoy um, a vacation. So even though we were as a family, we had moments where the kids were really kind of doing their own thing and it gave us an opportunity to do our own thing. So, we spent most of our days lounging at the beach or at the pool. One day we did an excursion where a boat took us out and we were able to swim in the Gulf of Mexico. The kids went snorkeling. It was like all of the things, and then most importantly, I feel like me and Lamar got an opportunity to really rest and reconnect. And additionally, we celebrated our 24-year wedding anniversary. There was a lot of things that were happening in August. But when you're married for 24 years, for as long as Lamar and I have been together, and when you lead a busy life and when you have kids, whew, it is so hard really to get that quality time in, which means you have to be intentional about doing that. And so that trip really allowed us to get some quality time in. We got to rekindle like our spark, and then we came back home, and we had a great date night to celebrate our wedding anniversary. Like it was great all around. But now that we're back, and now that school's back in session and the routines are settling in, life is returning to what I like to call our regularly scheduled program. And, as I sit right now in my office and I look out the window or out my French doors, um, and I can see the leaves turning color. Right, this is the season where I personally love the fall because you really get to see God's beauty in nature. The trees start, the leaves start to change color. And it's always it just marvels me how like one tree can go through so many changes. Like the leaves will turn from green to like orange and yellow and like all of these different types of colors until ultimately they shed and they fall off the tree. Um, and it's such a powerful reminder, or it's such a great metaphor for us, even. Like, if we think about ourselves as trees, right? Tall, stoic, strong, and all of the different ways that nature or life allows us to change, right? And in every shift and every change, there is a certain beauty. in that. And so as I look at the trees and I think about what it means and what the shedding means, um, it reminds me that every single change that happens in life and in nature has its purpose. And God, in his graciousness, um, has allowed for us to experience that change, right? Not just in our own lives, but in nature. And then I wonder, how often do we really sit and honor that change, honor the seasons of transition, both in nature and both in our lives? And I know that when it's happening to us personally, certain changes can be really hard. There can be seasons that are really difficult, especially if we're in a season where we're shedding stuff, where we're releasing things, where we're letting go of the things that no longer serve us or no longer grow us or that are keeping us stuck and stagnant. And sometimes that has to do with us personally. Sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes it plays out in our relationships. We might find ourselves in a season where we lose someone that we really love, that is an important part of our lives, and whether we lose them, through death or because the relationship has run its course, it doesn't matter, right? Like that loss is painful. And if this person has become uh like a an important part of our daily lives, it makes that pain even worse, right? Because now not only have we lost this individual, but now like our whole daily routine has shifted because now we have to shift how we go about our days. And so, sometimes it's not relationships, sometimes it's not people, sometimes, it's a job, sometimes it's a mindset that we have to release or a behavior or something that is no longer working for us, something that is no good for us. And one of the things that stick out to me, from one of the sermons that my pastor gave at church is the importance of knowing when to cut ties, right? And when we have to release the things that are keeping us stuck and holding us back from really becoming the best version of ourselves. And so when I reflect on the fall and how we're embracing it now, um, it reminds me that there is even beauty in the release, in the letting go. There's beauty in that, even if we can't see it at the moment. And so when we look at the leaves falling, right, and the trees shedding their leaves or the things that no longer serve them for the season that they're about to go into, it reminds us that God is always preparing us. And so, like the trees are shedding their leaves in order to prepare for their season of rest and hibernation and isolation. I invite you to think about your own life in the same way, right? If you find yourself right now in a season of transition, if you find yourself in a season of shedding, of release, of letting go, um, think about what it is that God is preparing you for. I know that our natural desire and the natural instinct is to try to hold on, right? Because we like to hold on to what is familiar. We like to hold on to what is comfortable because in our nature, we do not want to feel pain. We will do everything that we possibly can to avoid anything that's painful, right? And listen, I don't blame you. Like, I don't want to feel pain. But one thing that I've learned is that in the pain and in those moments of discomfort where we feel uncomfortable, where it's something brand new, where we're afraid, that right there is where God is building us up. That is where He is making us stronger. That is where He is also testing our faith to see how faithful we are in believing where He is taking us, how willing we are to follow His lead. And so I want you to consider embracing this season instead of resisting it, right? I want you to think of this, take this as an opportunity to make space for God's new work in you. Even if it feels painful, even if it feels uncertain, even if you're afraid because you don't know what the future is going to bring for you, this is where you got to trust God. And this is where, as uncomfortable as it might be for you, where you have to surrender. Because there are some things that we might be able to control in our lives, but a lot of times there are things that we can't. And when we can't control the outcome, the only thing we can do is control how we embrace it and how we receive it. And so I want to leave you with three takeaways for navigating seasons of transition, right? What are the things that we can learn from this? So, number one, I want you to release what no longer serves you, right? The trees don't cling to their leaves, they let them fall, trusting that new life will come in the spring, and they go a whole season bare and naked with nothing, right? We see it all the time. The trees are they're just standing out there in the middle of of our streets, bare and naked, right? But they trust that when the springtime comes, that they're going to give birth to new leaves. So I want you to think about, what is the thing that God is asking you to release in this season? Maybe it's an old habit. Maybe it's a limiting belief, right? Lord knows that many of us have those. I have them from time to time. Like, I'm not perfect, I'm human. Okay. And there's many times where I can get in my own head and let the enemy get up in here and creep up in here and lead me to believe things that are not true. So maybe you have to let go of that limiting belief. Maybe you got to let go of that negative voice. Maybe it's a relationship that's keeping you from stepping into what's next. I want you to spend some time and just kind of think about, what is that thing in your life that God is asking you to release. Number two, rest in God's timing. And we live in a society and a culture where we want things to happen on our own time. Like, I like to call it the microwave society. We want to put something in the microwave, put in 30 seconds, press start, and then we want it to come out and it be fully cooked and it be warm and all of the things, right? And sometimes life doesn't work like that. And God definitely does not work like that. So fall really is nature's reminder to slow down. And so maybe this is the season where you need to slow down. Maybe you have been working yourself to death. Maybe you have been trying to do all of the things, trying to please all of the people, but God is saying, pump the brakes. You really need to chill and you really need to take a rest. Because the truth is, growth doesn't happen in constant busyness. Like, if you're constantly busy, then you're not allowing yourself to grow in the way that you need to. Sometimes growth happens in stillness. And in stillness is where you definitely hear the voice of God. You're not going to hear God's voice. You're not going to hear his direction if you're constantly busy and your mind is full of noise. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 reminds us, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. So while we have seasons of busyness and seasons of work, we also have to have seasons of rest and seasons of slowing down, right? So I want you to just trust in God's timing, trust where he is taking you, even if you don't understand it yourself. Trust that God's timing is perfect. Even when it feels like nothing is happening, those are the moments where God is really working. It's in that stillness. And then lastly, renew your faith for what's ahead, right? Because transition is not the end. It's really preparing you for something new. Like, so many times we like to believe that when one door closes, that's it. But the truth is that when one door closes, it just makes way to open a new door. And so Use this time as your preparation. Use this time to lean in closer to God, to pray, to journal, to worship. Believe that what looks like loss right now may just be the setup for the promise that He's preparing you for. Because every transition has a divine purpose, whether we realize it or not, whether it's good or bad. God will use everything that we go through for His good and His glory. And so I hope that this week's episode blessed you. If it did, please share. That's the only way that the algorithm will, bring this up to other listeners. Make sure that you're sharing. If you have not already gave us a rating or posted a comment, I encourage that you do so. And even if you left a comment on past episodes, you could leave another comment and a review for this one. So until next time, I pray God's blessing over your life. I pray that you learn to trust that voice inside, that you start to trust your gut, and that you really allow God to lead you as you go about your day. So thank you so much for joining me today. For this first new episode of our new season. I pray that you were reminded that just like the seasons change, so do we, and God is in every single shift. Again, if this episode spoke to you, please subscribe, rate it, share it with a friend who might need certain encouragement today. And if you're not already following me on Instagram, on TikTok, on all of the platforms, my handle is the same across every social media platform. It's I am Nancy Ruffin. And if you want to head over to my website, and if you're interested in booking me for anything, for a speaking engagement, to be an MC, to be a host, whatever. I do everything. You can check out my website at www.iamnancyruffin.com. I'll be back next week with another conversation to help you walk boldly in your faith. So until next time, remember that you were created for more.